Paul came up with a good idea. And, after he did the second one, everyone said, oh, you got to make a third one or a fourth one.
Why a third Crocodile Dundee?
Why not?
Is this something that was your idea? Did Paramount come to you?
Nah.
Paul Hogan has opened up about recent paparazzi photos. He says he has one wish: to come back to Australia for good.
It was supposed to be just another movie scene, but when the cameras rolled on Crocodile Dundee, something happened that even the actors were not ready for. Linda Kozlowski's fear in that moment was not acting, and the entire crew knew it. What unfolded on set would blur the line between performance and reality, and years later her life would take a turn no one saw coming. The cameras were rolling, the crew was in position, and everyone expected the scene to play out like it had been rehearsed. But in the middle of filming, something happened that no script could prepare them for. Linda Kozlowski, the rising actress who had only just landed her breakout role, suddenly found herself face to face with a moment that blurred the line between movie magic and real danger. Her reaction was so genuine, so charged with raw fear, that even the crew stopped breathing for a second. Some later claimed it was the most authentic performance in the film. Others whispered that it was not a performance at all. For Linda, the line between fiction and reality had been crossed, and the experience left her shaken in a way she would never forget. At the time, Kozlowski was not a household name. She was another struggling actress in Los Angeles, clawing her way through auditions, competing against thousands of others who wanted the same shot. The industry was brutal, money was tight, and the pressure to prove herself was constant. Then came an audition for a small, low-budget comedy about an eccentric Australian crocodile hunter. Nobody thought the project would matter. The lead actor, Paul Hogan, was virtually unknown in Hollywood, and the budget was laughably modest by industry standards. Yet somehow, against all odds, Linda Kozlowski landed the female lead. It felt like just another job. One more role that might or might not help her career. But what she did not realize then was that this film would catapult her into stardom, change her life forever, and set off a chain of events that would later dominate headlines around the world. Before the fame, before the gossip columns, before her marriage to Hogan and the glare of international spotlight, there was the set itself, and that set was nothing like the glossy sound stages of Hollywood. Crocodile Dundee was shot deep in the Australian outback, where the dangers were not just imagined, they were everywhere. This was a place where venomous snakes slithered underfoot, massive spiders lurked in the shadows, and crocodiles were not computer-generated, they were real. For Kozlowski, playing Sue Charlton was not just about acting like a city journalist out of her element. She was living it, adapting to an environment that constantly reminded her of just how vulnerable she really was. The scene that haunted her most was one where Sue narrowly escapes the jaws of a crocodile before being saved by Mick Dundee. On screen, it played out as thrilling entertainment. Off-screen, the risks were not exaggerated. Linda later described how her hut during filming sat on the edge of a swamp where crocodiles actually lived. She recalled how bold they were. So bold that nightly trips to the restroom turned into nerve-wracking sprints, with everyone on set on edge about what might leap from the water. Even Paul Hogan admitted there were moments of real fear, confessing that a man with a loaded gun was positioned between Linda and the swamp during filming, just in case. It might have looked like fun adventure on camera, but the reality was deadly serious. For Linda, the crocodile was not just a prop, it was a threat. And while the world would later watch her performance and applaud her convincing fear, what they did not know was how much of that emotion was drawn from reality. Even years later, when asked about the experience, she admitted the conditions were harsh, the dangers were real, and the fear was never fully an act. That moment set the tone for her career. She was not just an actress in a comedy, she was someone who had proven her toughness in one of the most unforgiving filming locations imaginable. No one expected much from Crocodile Dundee. At best, insiders thought it would be a quirky regional comedy, a film that might do decent business in Australia, but would never cross over internationally. The budget told the same story, barely $7 million, cobbled together from an odd mix of investors. This was not Hollywood studio money. It was backed by an eclectic crew that included Australian businessmen, wealthy athletes, and even rock stars like INXS frontman Michael Hutchence. The film was a gamble, a project that looked destined to be a cult favorite at most. Yet in 1986, when it hit theaters, it did not just succeed, it became a phenomenon. Audiences around the world connected instantly with the humor, the fish-out-of-water storyline, and the charm of Mick Dundee. It was not just Australians who were laughing, it was Americans, Europeans, and people everywhere. The movie raked in a staggering $328 million worldwide, making it one of the highest-grossing comedies of the decade. To put that in perspective, it earned more than some major blockbusters with 5 times its budget. It was the kind of box office story that rewrites careers. For Linda Kozlowski, it was the break she had been waiting for. Practically overnight, she went from struggling to pay rent to starring in one of the most profitable films of the 1980s. Paul Hogan became a household name, hailed as the rugged Aussie who charmed the globe. But right beside him, Linda was no longer just the love interest. Audiences adored her sharp, street-smart portrayal of Sue Charlton. She was not a passive damsel in distress. She was witty, independent, and capable, which made her a refreshing presence in a decade when female leads were often reduced to stereotypes. Critics praised the chemistry between Hogan and Kozlowski, noting that without her grounded performance, the film would not have worked nearly as well. It was a career-defining moment, the kind that every struggling actor dreams of. But with success came new problems. The Hollywood machine does not just celebrate breakout stars. It quickly tries to mold them into predictable roles. For Linda, the buzz around her performance led to phone calls, offers, and scripts flooding in. Yet as flattering as it seemed, the opportunities revealed a harsh truth. The industry did not see her as a versatile actress. They saw her as Sue Charlton forever. Casting directors wanted her to play the girlfriend opposite other comedians, to replicate the formula that had worked in Crocodile Dundee. It was a narrow lane, and staying in it might have guaranteed steady work and bigger paychecks. But it also meant Linda would be trapped in roles that did not challenge her or respect her range. The global attention also magnified her personal life. Her chemistry with Hogan was not just on screen, it sparked rumors off screen too. Suddenly every magazine wanted to know if the two were more than co-stars, and the media frenzy only grew when their relationship turned real. The press could not get enough of them, especially in Hogan's native Australia, where they were treated like royalty. For a while, it felt like the fairy tale was playing out both in theaters and in real life. Still, behind the glamorous headlines and blockbuster numbers, Linda was already confronting a difficult reality. Hollywood was lining up roles, but they were the wrong roles. Her name was everywhere, but she had little control over how it was being used. The very movie that gave her everything also started to corner her, pushing her into a box she did not want to live in. Hollywood loves a formula. The moment Crocodile Dundee blew up, casting directors thought they had cracked Linda Kozlowski's type. She was smart, beautiful, and believable next to a comic male lead. To the industry, that was all she needed to be. The offers poured in, but there was one problem. They were almost all the same. She was being asked again and again to play the girlfriend of some funny man. The script would change, the jokes would be different, but her role was identical. Stand beside the star, react, smile, and fade into the background once the punchline landed. For Linda, it was not a dream come true, it was a trap. In interviews years later, she admitted that the pattern became obvious immediately. Producers saw her as Sue Charlton forever, the sharp journalist who tagged along for the adventure but never got to drive the story. The industry was not interested in what else she could do. She had trained at the prestigious Juilliard School, honing her craft with the kind of discipline meant for stage and film versatility, not to play endless variations of the same girlfriend role. So when the scripts came across her desk, she did something most rising stars would not dare. She started saying no. Turning down work in Hollywood is risky. Every no means losing money, losing visibility, and risking that the calls eventually stop altogether. But Linda was not willing to accept easy roles that chipped away at her self-respect. She admitted she could have taken them and stayed in the spotlight, but she did not want to waste years being typecast. Instead, she held out, hoping for something better, something that never came. The business simply was not interested in her range. To the machine, she was a one-note actress who had peaked as Sue. This decision baffled many around her. Other actors would have killed for steady work. especially roles connected to proven box office formulas. But Linda was not chasing fame for fame's sake. She wanted depth, authenticity, and material that would excite her. Hollywood, however, had no interest in giving her that chance. This mismatch between her artistic values and the industry's rigid expectations slowly began to push her out of the system. At the same time, the public fascination with her personal life made things even more complicated. Her relationship with Paul Hogan was not just gossip, it was a tabloid obsession. Everywhere they went, cameras followed. The media treated them like a package deal, and in many ways, so did Hollywood. To casting directors, she was not just Linda Kozlowski, she was Paul Hogan's partner. And once the Crocodile Dundee sequels came along, the connection between her career and his only deepened. It was as if the industry had decided that her only future was to remain tethered to Hogan's orbit, both on screen and off. This dynamic frustrated Linda. She knew her worth, she knew her training, and she knew she could do more. But every role she turned down was a reminder that Hollywood was not willing to see her differently. By the 1990s, she had already realized the machine was not going to change. If she wanted to maintain her integrity, she would have to step away from the conveyor belt. And as bold as that choice was, it came with consequences. The phone rang less, the spotlight dimmed, and slowly, Linda began to disappear from the Hollywood landscape. Still, she had one thing the industry could not take from her: her partnership with Hogan. Their relationship gave her a foundation, even as the roles dried up. But the more the world focused on their marriage, the less it cared about her ambitions as an actress. For audiences, the chemistry between Linda Kozlowski and Paul Hogan was undeniable. On screen, they played opposites who fell for each other against the rugged backdrop of the Australian outback. Off-screen, that chemistry became impossible to ignore. Rumors swirled almost immediately after Crocodile Dundee hit theaters, with tabloids speculating that the sparks between them were not just good acting. At first, the pair stayed quiet, letting the gossip columns have their fun. But silence only fueled curiosity. By the late 1980s, the whispers had become headlines. The controversy was not only about romance. Hogan had been married for nearly 30 years, and was a father of 5 when he met Linda. Their budding relationship attracted criticism and fascination in equal measure, especially in Australia, where Hogan was already a national icon. For some, it felt like a scandal. For others, it was a fairy tale unfolding in real time. The press could not get enough of it. Paparazzi followed them relentlessly, and magazines covered every public appearance, every glance, every possible clue that confirmed what audiences already suspected. Mick and Sue were not just characters, they were real. In 1990, the speculation ended. Paul Hogan, then 51, and Linda Kozlowski, then 33, married in a private ceremony in Sydney. The wedding was described as intimate, with about 100 close friends and family, but the media frenzy surrounding it was anything but quiet. Reporters were banned from the ceremony itself, yet the coverage outside made it feel like a royal wedding. Hogan even reportedly gifted Linda a custom-built mansion in Australia as a wedding present, a gesture that only added to the myth of their union. For a while, it seemed like they were living the dream. Successful films, glamorous homes, and a love story that audiences wanted desperately to believe in. Professionally, their relationship kept feeding the brand. When Crocodile Dundee 2 hit theaters in 1988, it earned over $200 million worldwide. The sequel was not as fresh as the first, but the public was still invested, not just in the story, but in the real couple behind it. Linda and Paul's off-screen romance became a marketing hook, as much as the movie itself. Hollywood leaned into it, and for a time, it worked. But the glow did not last forever. By the 1990s, critics began to dismiss the franchise as repetitive. Their next project together, Almost an Angel in 1990, was a box office disappointment. By the time Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles was released in 2001, the magic had largely faded. The film earned only a fraction of the original, and for Linda, it marked the end of her acting career altogether. As the films declined, their personal lives continued to attract attention. The press never stopped treating them like Australia's power couple. Every vacation photo, every red carpet, every quiet family outing was documented. For Linda, that level of attention was exhausting. She later admitted how difficult it was to be constantly under scrutiny, especially since their relationship had started while Hogan was still married. Even after years together, the shadow of that controversy never completely went away. She described staying silent at the time as the classy, elegant thing to do, but the weight of public judgment followed her for decades. Despite the media frenzy, their marriage lasted longer than most people expected. For more than 20 years, Linda and Paul built a life together, raising their son Chance, and sharing both professional and personal highs and lows. But by the early 2010s, it was clear things were shifting. In 2013, after 23 years of marriage, they announced their separation. A year later, the divorce was finalized. Unlike many Hollywood breakups, theirs was remarkably civil. There were no ugly public fights, no tabloid exposés, no drawn-out court battles. Reports indicated Linda received a settlement of around $5.77 million, along with property arrangements, and both sides described the split as amicable. Paul later admitted that they were simply opposites who had grown apart over time. Linda echoed the sentiment, saying they had nothing in common anymore and that their parting was not bitter, it was just life. For most actors, starring in one of the highest-grossing films of the decade would be the start of a long and thriving career. But for Linda Kozlowski, it was the opposite. After Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles hit theaters in 2001, she quietly disappeared from the screen, never taking another acting job again. Fans were left wondering how an actress who had become a global star in her 30s could walk away at just 43, seemingly at the peak of her career. The answer was not scandal or failure, it was choice. Linda decided that Hollywood had nothing left to offer her. By her own account, the roles being sent her way were uninspiring and repetitive. She revealed in interviews that the scripts she received after Dundee felt cheap and formulaic, often destined for the straight-to-video market. They were not films that would challenge her, excite her, or even justify the long hours of production. To Linda, these offers felt like an insult. After training at Juilliard and working tirelessly to break into the industry, she was not going to waste her talent on projects where her only job was to stand beside the male lead and smile. Rather than compromise, she did something few actors have the courage to do. She stopped. Of course, stepping away from Hollywood was not easy. Acting had been her dream, and turning her back on it meant giving up the fame, the money, and the recognition that came with it. But Linda was not chasing validation anymore. She had already proven herself with Crocodile Dundee, and she was not willing to settle for less just to stay in the spotlight. She made it clear that her values mattered more than her image, and in doing so, she avoided the kind of slow, painful decline that many actors face when they take roles beneath their abilities. Her decision also reflected her changing priorities. By the early 2000s, Linda was more focused on her marriage and her role as a mother than on building a Hollywood resume. She and Paul Hogan were raising their son Chance, and the glare of the industry made family life complicated. Choosing to step away gave her the freedom to live on her own terms, without every career move being dissected by critics or tabloids. In many ways, it was an act of self-preservation. Still, her departure left fans puzzled. Here was a woman who had captured the world's attention, who had shown both talent and charisma, and yet she walked away at a time when she could have cemented herself as a Hollywood mainstay. To some, it looked like she had wasted her big break. To Linda, it looked like freedom. As she later put it, acting often got in the way of having a truly adventurous life. Waiting around Los Angeles for the next mediocre role was not the kind of adventure she wanted. That choice also set her apart from Paul Hogan. While Hogan kept working in film and television projects, though with diminishing success, Linda was content to step out of the spotlight entirely. She did not chase the next gig. She did not cling to past fame, and she did not attempt to reinvent herself as a character actress. She simply closed the book and walked away, a rare move in an industry obsessed with clinging to relevance at any cost. But Linda's story did not end with Hollywood. Far from it, because leaving acting behind did not mean giving up on life. In fact, it opened the door to an entirely new chapter, one that would take her far from California and into a place where she would finally find the adventure and independence she had always been searching for. When Linda Kozlowski left Hollywood, many assumed she would fade quietly into private life somewhere in California. But Linda had no interest in retreating into a quiet suburb or living in the shadow of her past fame. Instead, she looked outward, searching for something completely different, something that would ignite her adventurous spirit in a way acting no longer could. She found it thousands of miles away from Los Angeles, in Morocco. Her journey began with travel, a passion she had always carried but never fully indulged while tied to the unpredictable rhythms of the film industry. On one of those trips, she met Moulay Hafid Baba, a Moroccan tour guide whose knowledge of his homeland and easy charm immediately captured her attention. Linda later described their meeting as magic, saying it felt as though they had known each other for 1,000 years. The connection was instant, and unlike the Hollywood romances that often burn bright and fade fast, this was something deeper. With Baba, Linda found not just love but a partner who shared her sense of adventure and her desire for a life far removed from the glare of cameras. Together, they built Dream My Destiny, a bespoke luxury tour company based in Marrakesh. The idea was simple but powerful. Combine Linda's eye for style, sophistication, and what modern travelers crave with Baba's deep knowledge of Morocco's landscapes, culture, and hidden gems. Their tours catered to those who wanted more than just sightseeing. They offered immersive experiences from exploring the Sahara Desert to navigating the bustling souks of Marrakesh with an insider's touch. For Linda, this was not just a business, it was a way to channel her creativity, her love of people, and her passion for adventure into something tangible. By 2018, she made the bold decision to sell her Los Angeles home and relocate to Morocco full-time. It was not a temporary escape, it was a reinvention. Friends and reporters described her as glowing with happiness in her new life, no longer tethered to the endless grind of auditions and scripts. Instead, she was building a future that felt authentic and exciting. She embraced not just the business but also the culture, spending her days balancing the thrill of adventure with the peace of a slower, more intentional lifestyle. What made this reinvention remarkable was how complete it was. Linda did not dip a toe into business while keeping one foot in Hollywood. She severed ties and moved on, fully investing in her Moroccan venture and the life it brought with it. In interviews, she spoke about how acting often restricted her, keeping her tied to Los Angeles and forcing her to wait endlessly for opportunities that rarely lived up to their promise. In Morocco, she did not have to wait for anyone's approval. She could create, build, and shape her own destiny without limitations. Her partnership with Baba was not limited to business either. The two developed a strong personal relationship, with rumors circulating as early as 2017 that they had secretly married. Whether or not the ceremony ever took place, what was undeniable was the bond between them and the stability it gave Linda. After decades of her personal life being public fodder, she finally found love in a space where she was not being judged by tabloids or paparazzi. Instead of scandal and speculation, she found trust and adventure. Linda also began exploring other passions. She expressed interest in launching a Moroccan-inspired clothing line, and she often talked about her dreams of living on an olive farm and running a donkey sanctuary outside Marrakesh. These were not vanity projects. They reflected her new values, centered on simplicity, connection with nature, and giving back. For someone who had once been thrust into the chaos of Hollywood fame, this life represented the ultimate escape, control, peace, and independence. In Morocco, she was not just the actress from Crocodile Dundee. She was not Paul Hogan's ex-wife. She was Linda Kozlowski, entrepreneur, adventurer, and independent woman, living life on her terms for the first time. Decades after Crocodile Dundee first hit theaters, there is one scene that fans cannot stop talking about: the crocodile attack. On screen, it was a heart-pounding moment where Sue Charlton, played by Linda Kozlowski, comes terrifyingly close to becoming a croc's next meal before being saved by Mick Dundee. It looked so real, so visceral, that viewers walked away convinced something more had happened behind the camera. Over time, a rumor took root, that the fear on Linda's face was not acting at all, but a genuine reaction to danger that had slipped past the safety net of the production. To this day, fans debate whether that one shot blurred the line between performance and reality. The truth, as it often is in Hollywood, sits somewhere between myth and fact. There is no solid evidence that Linda was ever in direct danger during the shoot. No official reports, no behind-the-scenes confession confirming a crocodile went off script. Yet the speculation persists because the set itself was anything but safe. The film was not shot on a soundstage in Los Angeles. It was filmed in the remote Australian outback, where crocodiles were not computer-generated creations. They were very real. Linda herself admitted that her hut on location was situated right next to a swamp full of crocodiles. She recalled how bold they were, sneaking onto land at night and making even routine trips to the restroom feel like life-or-death missions. For the cast and crew, the outback was not a backdrop. It was a predator's territory. Paul Hogan later revealed that the danger was not exaggerated. He explained that during filming, they actually stationed a man with a loaded gun between Linda and the water. It was not paranoia, it was precaution. The crocodiles in that area had killed people before, and the production could not take chances. Even with safety protocols, the ever-present risk made the atmosphere tense. So while the film's most famous croc scene may have been movie magic, the fear Linda carried onto the set each day was entirely real. In that sense, her performance was not just acting. It was survival instinct sharpened by an environment that refused to be tamed. Fans who rewatch the film today often point to her expression during that sequence as proof that she was not pretending. Was it clever directing? Was it a rare moment, when adrenaline overpowered acting technique? Or was it exactly what the rumors suggest? That for a split second, Linda Kozlowski was not playing Sue Charlton. She was Linda, an actress out of her depth in the wild? The lack of definitive answers only makes the speculation stronger. What is certain is that this blend of fact and myth has kept the scene alive in pop culture. Crocodile Dundee was not known for cutting-edge special effects, but the authenticity of its outback setting gave it a raw edge that audiences did not see in typical Hollywood comedies. Linda's performance in that moment, whether born of acting or real fear, became a defining piece of the film's legacy. It gave audiences something to whisper about, something that kept the story alive long after the box office numbers stopped climbing. For Linda, the speculation is just part of the larger narrative of her life. She survived the outback, she survived the industry's typecasting, and she survived the glare of the tabloids. That crocodile scene, whether exaggerated in fan lore or not, symbolized the tightrope she walked, balancing the line between reality and performance, between personal truth and public perception. It was the moment that made her unforgettable, even as she later chose to leave the industry behind. And that is the irony, because as much as fans remember the crocodile scene, Linda herself will be remembered for something far greater: her decision to walk away from Hollywood and design a life entirely her own. For many actors, legacy is defined by the roles they leave behind, the awards on the shelf, or the number of films their name appears in. Linda Kozlowski chose something very different. Her legacy is not about clinging to Hollywood or chasing endless sequels. It is about knowing when to step away. She walked into the spotlight with Crocodile Dundee, turned down the chance to become a one-note supporting star, and instead built a life on her own terms. In an industry where so many people sacrifice their happiness for one more shot at relevance, Linda made the radical decision to put herself first. The irony is that her biggest role was also her last. To audiences, she will always be Sue Charlton, the smart, fearless journalist who ventured into the outback and held her own against the wilderness. That character gave her immortality in pop culture, even if she only played it a handful of times. Yet away from the cameras, Linda's real journey became even more compelling. She rejected typecasting, walked away from uninspiring offers, and later built a second act in Morocco that had nothing to do with Hollywood's definition of success. For Linda, happiness was not standing under bright lights or winning over critics. It was exploring new cultures, creating a business with her partner, and living a life filled with adventure and independence. Her story is a reminder that fame does not always equal fulfillment. She could have stayed in Los Angeles, taken the roles that came her way, and lived comfortably in the shadow of her breakout film. Instead, she sold her home, left Hollywood behind, and reinvented herself as an entrepreneur in a foreign land. Few stars have the courage to do that, and fewer still find the kind of peace that Linda now radiates. She embraced change instead of fighting it, and in doing so, she gained something that awards and box office numbers could never provide: freedom. Even her relationship with Paul Hogan, once the centerpiece of her public identity, became just a chapter in her larger story. Their marriage was watched, judged, and dissected for decades. But when it ended, Linda did not crumble or retreat. She moved forward with grace, staying on good terms with Hogan while carving her own future. The woman who once played the adventurous New Yorker out of her element in the Australian bush went on to live a life just as daring, trading movie sets for the Moroccan desert and Hollywood gossip for authentic experiences. And while fans still speculate about that crocodile scene, debating whether Linda's fear was real or staged, the truth is that her entire career mirrored that moment. She was thrown into something dangerous, unpredictable, and bigger than she expected, and she faced it head-on. Just like Sue Charlton, she adapted, survived, and ultimately chose her own path out of the wilderness. Today, Linda Kozlowski's legacy is not just tied to one blockbuster film. It is tied to the courage of reinvention. She proved that an actress can step out of the Hollywood machine and still find joy, love, and success in unexpected places. For her fans, she will always be the face of Crocodile Dundee. But for herself, she is something more. A woman who traded the illusion of fame for a reality far richer than any script could have written. And that may be the greatest twist of all. Because while Hollywood tried to script her life, Linda Kozlowski proved she was always capable of writing her own ending.